The wagon wheel cracked against a stone, and Theresa Dalton felt her heart crack with it, knowing she had no money to fix it and 4 hungry children depending on her to keep moving forward. She pulled the horses to a halt, climbed down from the driver's seat with exhaustion weighing her bones, and inspected the damage. The wood had splintered clean through, rendered useless by the unforgiving Colorado terrain. Her eldest daughter, 10-year-old Mary, peered out from under the canvas covering. "Mama, what happened?" "Just a wheel, sweetheart. Nothing we cannot handle." The lie tasted bitter on Theresa's tongue. She had been telling herself and her children variations of that same lie for 3 months now, ever since Thomas had succumbed to the fever that swept through their homestead outside Santa Fe. Everything was not fine. Everything was falling apart like dried leaves in a harsh wind. The year was 1878, and Theresa had been trying to make her way north to Denver where her sister supposedly lived, though she had not heard from Catherine in over 2 years. The children were hungry. Mary, 8-year-old Samuel, 6-year-old Rebecca, and 4-year-old James had been living on cornmeal and dried beans for weeks. Now, even that meager supply was nearly gone. 2 days of food remained, maybe 3 if she stretched it impossibly thin and took nothing for herself. The sun beat down mercilessly on the prairie outside Pueblo. Theresa had hoped to pass through the town quickly, avoiding unnecessary expenses, but the broken wheel changed everything. She would need help, and help cost money she did not have. Her hands trembled as she unhitched the horses. At 24 years old, she felt ancient, worn down by grief and responsibility. "Mama, I am thirsty." James's small voice called from the wagon. "Just a moment, my love." She retrieved the water skin and helped each child take a small sip, rationing even this, though a creek ran somewhere nearby. Everything had to be considered, measured, protected. She was all they had. Samuel climbed down beside her, trying to be the man of the family, though his thin shoulders and dirty face revealed how young he still was. "I can help fix it, Mama." She ran her fingers through his tangled brown hair. He had his father's eyes, that same determined gleam that had convinced her to leave St. Louis 7 years ago for the promise of Western land. Look where that determination had led them. "We need a wheelwright, Sam. This is beyond our skills." She scanned the horizon. Pueblo sat perhaps 2 miles distant, its buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat. "We will have to walk there. All of us?" Mary asked, holding James's hand as she helped him down from the wagon. "No, you stay here with the little ones. I will take Samuel with me." Theresa made the decision quickly, though leaving her children alone on the prairie terrified her. But dragging all 4 through town, their poverty and desperation on full display, seemed worse somehow. She needed to maintain some dignity, some appearance of control. The walk to Pueblo took nearly an hour under the blazing sun. Samuel complained only once about his feet hurting before clamping his mouth shut, sensing his mother's fragile state. They entered town on the main street, passing the Mercantile, a saloon called the Silver Spur, a hotel that looked far too expensive, and finally a wheelwright's shop. The man inside quoted her $8 for a new wheel. $8 she did not have. She had perhaps $2.30 to her name, funds that needed to last until Denver, until Catherine, until some imagined rescue that seemed more unlikely with each passing day. "I can offer $2 now and send the rest when I reach my destination," Theresa said, hating the pleading tone in her voice. The wheelwright, a portly man with suspicious eyes, shook his head. "Cash only, madam. Times are hard for everyone." She wanted to scream that times were harder for some than others, that this man would go home to a full meal while her children went to bed with growling stomachs, but she simply nodded and left, Samuel trailing behind her. They were walking back toward the edge of town when Samuel tugged her sleeve. "Mama, I am really hungry." "I know, sweetheart. When we get back to the wagon, please, just a little something." Theresa looked at her son's pale face and made another decision she could ill afford. They stepped into the general store, and she purchased a small loaf of bread for 15 cents. Samuel tore into it immediately, and she did not stop him, even though she had wanted that bread to stretch between all 4 children. As they exited the store, a commotion erupted from the saloon across the street. 2 men stumbled out, fists flying, drawing a crowd. Theresa pulled Samuel close, intending to hurry past, when one of the fighting men crashed into a water trough, sending up a tremendous splash. The other man, tall and lean with dark hair, stepped back, breathing hard but not continuing the assault. "That is enough, Miller," the tall man said, his voice carrying authority despite the violence that had just transpired. "Go sleep it off." The man in the trough sputtered and cursed, but eventually staggered away. The crowd began to disperse, and the tall man turned, his eyes landing directly on Theresa and Samuel. She felt suddenly exposed, this stranger's gaze taking in her threadbare dress, her son's hollow cheeks, the desperation she wore like a second skin. The man walked toward them, and Theresa instinctively stepped back. He raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Did not mean to frighten you, madam. Just wanted to apologize for that display. Not the kind of welcome Pueblo should offer travelers." "We are fine," Theresa said curtly, taking Samuel's hand to leave. "You are not from around here," the man continued, falling into step beside them despite her obvious desire to be left alone. "Just passing through. That was the intention, yes." She kept her eyes forward, her stride purposeful. She did not answer, but Samuel, with a child's lack of guile, piped up, "Our wheel broke. Mama cannot afford to fix it, and we only have 2 days of food left, and Samuel—" Theresa's voice came out sharper than intended. Her son's face crumpled, and she immediately regretted her tone. "I am sorry, sweetheart. We should not burden strangers with our troubles." The man stopped walking, forcing Theresa to stop as well out of politeness. When she finally looked at him properly, she saw he was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 27 or 28, with green eyes that held something she had not seen in a long time: genuine concern, not pity. "My name is Xander Falcon," he said. "I run a ranch about 5 miles west of town, and I am not sure what kind of man I would be if I heard about 4 hungry children and a broken wagon and just walked away from that." 4. Theresa's eyes widened. "How did he know?" Xander smiled slightly. "Your son said 2 days of food. You only bought 1 small loaf of bread. You are traveling with more than just the boy, or you would have bought enough for both of you. The way you keep looking back toward the prairie suggests you left someone behind. 4 seemed like a reasonable guess for a wagon that size." Despite everything, Theresa felt a flicker of something: amusement, perhaps, or admiration for his deduction. "You should have been a detective, Mr. Falcon." "Just observant, madam. Comes from ranching. You learn to notice things." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Look, I know you do not know me from Adam, and you have no reason to trust me, but my ranch has more space than I know what to do with, and my table has room for every one of you. Your children need food, and I need help around the property. Maybe we can work something out that does not involve pride or charity, just honest exchange." Theresa stared at him, searching for the angle, the hidden price. Men did not offer help without expecting something in return. "What kind of help? Can you cook? Of course. Can you mend, clean, manage a household?" "I managed a homestead for 6 years, Mr. Falcon. I can do all those things and more." Xander nodded. "Then work for me. A few weeks, maybe a month. I will feed your family, fix your wagon, and pay you enough to get you to Denver comfortably. In exchange, you handle the domestic side of the ranch while I handle the cattle and horses. My cooking is liable to poison someone eventually, and the house looks like it was hit by a tornado. It was too good to be true, which meant it probably was not true at all. I have 4 children, Mr. Falcon. Children make noise and messes and get underfoot. Most men have no patience for that. Then I guess I am not most men. He met her gaze steadily. I am not going to pretend I am some saint, madam. The truth is, I am desperate for help around that ranch and you need food and shelter. This is not charity, this is business. But if you would rather struggle on alone, I will respect that and leave you be. Samuel tugged her hand. Mama, can we, please? I am so hungry, and Mary tries not to say anything, but I know she is too. Theresa closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision crushing her chest. Every instinct screamed not to trust this stranger, to protect her children, to maintain control of their situation. But another voice, quieter but more insistent, whispered that her children needed food today, not in 2 days when the supplies ran out, not in some imagined future in Denver. Today. If I agree to this, you will fix the wagon immediately so we can leave if circumstances require it. She opened her eyes, looking directly at Xander. First thing tomorrow morning, I will fix it myself. And separate sleeping arrangements. The children and I stay together behind a locked door. The house has 4 bedrooms. You and your family can have the entire upstairs. I will stay in the downstairs bedroom. I will even give you the only key to the upstairs if it makes you feel safer. Theresa took a deep breath. Then I suppose we have an agreement, Mr. Falcon, though I reserve the right to leave at any moment if I feel my children are in any danger. I would expect nothing less, madam, and I did not catch your name, Theresa Dalton. My son here is Samuel. Back at the wagon are Mary, Rebecca, and James. Xander extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Theresa shook it. His grip was firm but not crushing, his palm calloused from hard work. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Dalton. Now, let us go get your family and their things. I have a wagon here in town I can hitch up. We will have everyone settled at the ranch before dark. The next few hours passed in a blur. Xander proved true to his word, producing a sturdy wagon and helping transfer all of the Dalton family's meager possessions from the broken wagon to his. The children were shy at first, clinging to Theresa, but Xander did not push. He simply worked efficiently, securing their belongings, and then helped each child up into the wagon with patient gentleness. The ride to the ranch revealed rolling prairie dotted with cattle. The house itself was larger than Theresa expected, a 2-story structure made of timber and stone that looked solid and well maintained from the outside. The inside, however, confirmed Xander's claim about the tornado. Dust covered every surface, dishes were piled in the kitchen, and the whole place had the neglected air of a space inhabited but not truly lived in. My wife died 2 years ago, Xander said quietly as Theresa surveyed the main room, the children exploring cautiously around her. Childbirth. The baby did not make it either. I have not had much heart for housekeeping since then. A neighbor woman comes by once a month to keep it from complete disaster, but as you can see, that is not nearly enough. I am sorry for your loss, Theresa said and meant it. She understood the landscape of grief, the way it could turn daily tasks into insurmountable mountains. Thank you. Xander moved to the kitchen, stoking the stove. Why do you not get the children settled upstairs? I will start supper. It will not be fancy, but it will be filling. Theresa took her children upstairs, finding the rooms clean if dusty. The beds had actual mattresses, quilts, pillows, luxuries they had not experienced in months. Mary immediately burst into tears, overwhelmed by the kindness, and Theresa held her eldest daughter close, feeling her own tears threaten. "Are we safe here, Mama?" Rebecca asked, her 6-year-old face solemn. "I believe so, sweetheart. But we will stay cautious, yes. And remember, this is temporary. Just until we get strong enough to continue to Denver." But even as she said the words, Theresa felt something shift inside her. For the first time since Thomas's death, they were truly sheltered. For the first time in weeks, her children would go to bed with full bellies. Maybe, just maybe, accepting help was not weakness but wisdom. Downstairs, true to his word, Xander prepared a simple meal of fried potatoes, beans, and bacon. To the Dalton children, it might as well have been a feast. They ate with single-minded focus, and Xander kept refilling their plates without comment until finally, even James pushed his plate away, satisfied. "There is a pump out back for washing up," Xander told Theresa as the meal concluded. "And the privy is behind the barn. I will show you around properly tomorrow, but for tonight, just make yourselves comfortable. If you need anything, holler." That night, Theresa locked the bedroom door and arranged all 4 children in one bed, then lay down beside them, holding them close. She waited for sounds of Xander approaching, for demands or expectations, but heard only the quiet settling of the house and, eventually, silence. Exhaustion pulled her under, and for the first time in months she slept deeply without fear. Morning arrived with the sound of a hammer ringing against metal. Theresa woke, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. The children still slept, tangled together like puppies. She rose quietly, dressed, and made her way downstairs to find Xander already gone. Through the kitchen window, she spotted him outside working on her wagon wheel, his shirt already damp with sweat despite the early hour. She started coffee, cleaned the kitchen from last night's meal, and then began preparing breakfast. By the time Xander came in an hour later, the table was set with eggs, biscuits, and gravy made from supplies she found in his well-stocked pantry. He stopped in the doorway, staring at the table. "I cannot remember the last time this house smelled like this. Like food," Theresa asked, pouring him coffee like a home. He sat down heavily, accepting the cup with a grateful nod. "Thank you, Mrs. Dalton. Theresa is fine, and you are welcome, Mr. Falcon. It is the least I can do. Then you should call me Xander." He sipped the coffee, closing his eyes. "This is perfect. How did you make coffee taste this good with the same supplies I have been using? You probably use too much water and do not let it brew long enough." She sat across from him, her own cup warming her hands. "Men usually do." A smile tugged at his lips. "You are probably right." The children thundered downstairs then, drawn by the smell of food. Breakfast became a lively affair, with Samuel peppering Xander with questions about the ranch and the cattle, while Mary helped serve her younger siblings, and Rebecca and James simply ate with enthusiasm. After breakfast, Xander returned to the wagon repair while Theresa began the monumental task of cleaning the house. Mary helped with the younger children, keeping them entertained outside under strict instructions to stay within sight of the house. Theresa scrubbed, swept, dusted, and organized, falling into familiar rhythms that soothed something in her soul. By midday, the downstairs gleamed. Xander came in for lunch, stopped short, and looked around in amazement. "Is this the same house?" "Wait until you see what I can do with the upstairs." Theresa set cold chicken and bread on the table. "This afternoon I will tackle the bedrooms and the spare room down here. You do not have to do all this in one day." "I do not mind. It feels good to be useful." She hesitated. "And I do not want you to think you made a mistake bringing us here." Xander met her eyes seriously. "Theresa, I could not possibly think that watching my home transform and eating real food for the first time in months, you have already earned your keep twice over." Something warm bloomed in Theresa's chest at his words, but she tamped it down firmly. This was business, she reminded herself. Temporary business. They would leave in a few weeks, continue to Denver, build a life with her sister. This ranch, this man, they were just a way station, nothing more. But as days turned into a week, then 2 weeks, Theresa found herself settling into life at the Falcon Ranch with dangerous ease. She woke early to prepare breakfast, spent mornings teaching the children their letters and numbers, then devoted afternoons to cooking, cleaning, mending, and all the tasks that kept a household running. The children thrived, gaining weight and color, their laughter ringing through the house. Xander proved to be a kind and patient presence. He carved wooden toys for James, taught Samuel how to care for horses, helped Rebecca overcome her fear of the ranch dogs, and spoke to Mary with the respect due a young woman, not a child. He never raised his voice, never showed impatience with the chaos 4 children could create, never looked at Theresa with anything other than respect and growing friendship. Theresa found herself looking forward to evenings when Xander would come in from the range, and they would talk over coffee after the children went to bed. He told her about building the ranch from nothing, about his dreams of expanding the herd, about his late wife Elizabeth, who had been his childhood sweetheart. She told him about Thomas, about their struggles on the homestead, about her fears and hopes for her children's futures. "Do you ever think about staying in Colorado?" Xander asked one evening about 3 weeks into their arrangement. They sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and purple. "Instead of going on to Denver, I mean." Theresa's heart skipped. She had been thinking about exactly that, but had not allowed herself to voice it. "My sister is in Denver, that was always the plan." But is it still the plan? Things change, circumstances change. "What are you suggesting, Xander?" She turned to look at him, needing to see his face. He met her gaze steadily. "I am suggesting that you and your children could have a place here if you wanted one, a permanent place. This arrangement has been good for all of us. The house feels alive again, I feel alive again, and your children are happy and healthy." He paused. "I know it has only been a few weeks, but I want you to know the option exists. No pressure, no expectations beyond what we already have. Just something to consider." Theresa's mind raced. Stay here. Make a life on this ranch. Let her children grow up with space and safety and a good man who clearly cared for them. It was tempting, so tempting it frightened her. But Thomas had been gone less than 4 months. Was it wrong to even contemplate this? Was it a betrayal? "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Can you give me time, all the time you need? The offer stands whenever you are ready, whether that is next week or next year or never." That night, Theresa lay awake, her thoughts churning. She had noticed things about Xander, these past weeks, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his large hands when he handled her children, the deep rumble of his laugh when Samuel told a joke. She had noticed the breadth of his shoulders, the silver starting to thread through his dark hair at the temples, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. She had also noticed her own reactions, the flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally brushed, the disappointment when he had to be away from the ranch for a day, the contentment she felt simply sitting beside him in companionable silence. Was this attraction? More than attraction, was this the beginning of something deeper? And if it was, did she have the courage to pursue it? The next morning, a rider approached the ranch. Theresa was hanging laundry when she spotted the dust cloud, and something about it made her uneasy. The man who dismounted was weathered and hard-looking, with calculating eyes that swept the property appraisingly. "Help you?" Xander emerged from the barn, his tone neutral but not friendly. Name is Cole Vernon. I am buying up properties in this area. Interested in making an offer on your ranch. Not interested in selling. Vernon smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. You have not heard my offer yet. Do not need to. This ranch is not for sale at any price. The man's gaze drifted to where Theresa stood with the laundry basket, then to where the children played near the house. Nice family you have got here, Falcon. Would be a shame if anything happened to them. Theresa's blood went cold. Xander went very still, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet and deadly. That sounded like a threat, Vernon. I suggest you leave my property right now before I give you a reason to regret that. Vernon held up his hands mockingly. No threat, just an observation. These are dangerous times. Accidents happen. Fires, floods, cattle stampedes, you never know. He mounted his horse, looking down at Xander. I will be back in a week for your answer. Think carefully about what is important to you. He rode away, and Theresa hurried over to Xander, who stood rigid with barely controlled anger. What was that about? Trouble, Xander said grimly. Vernon is a land speculator. He has been pressuring several ranchers to sell. Those who refuse have faced mysterious problems: burned barns, poisoned cattle, worse. Has he approached you before? 3 times. I have refused each time. This is the first time he has gotten threatening about it. Xander looked at her, his expression tormented. Theresa, I am so sorry. I brought you and your children here thinking you would be safe, and now I have put you in danger. We were in danger before, just a different kind. Theresa touched his arm without thinking. At least here we are not alone. Over the next few days, tension hung over the ranch like a storm cloud. Xander barely slept, patrolling the property at night. Theresa found herself jumping at shadows, keeping the children closer than usual. Samuel, sensing the adult's fear, became withdrawn and anxious. On the 4th night, Theresa could not sleep. She went downstairs to make tea and found Xander sitting at the kitchen table, his rifle within reach, staring at nothing. You cannot keep this up, she said softly, putting the kettle on. You will collapse. If I collapse, at least everyone will still be alive and the ranch will still be standing. Xander, she sat beside him. Tell me honestly, how bad could this get? He was quiet for a long moment. Bad. Vernon has money and men who do not ask questions. If he decides to push, we could lose everything. Then maybe you should consider selling. His head whipped toward her, surprise clear on his face. What? This is land and cattle and a house, Xander. Those things can be replaced. Your life cannot be. If Vernon is as dangerous as you say, this ranch is all I have left of Elizabeth, Xander interrupted, his voice raw. We built it together, dreamed together here. If I sell to that vulture, I will have nothing left of her. Nothing that says we existed, that our life together mattered. Theresa understood that kind of grief. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. Your memories of Elizabeth do not live in the land, Xander. They live in you. In the way you treat people with kindness, the way you see someone struggling and offer help without hesitation. In the way you loved her enough to build a life that honored that love. Vernon cannot take those things from you unless you let him. His fingers tightened around hers. When did you get so wise? When I had 4 children depending on me to make impossible decisions every day. She squeezed his hand back. I am not saying you should sell. I am saying you should not sacrifice yourself for land. There are other options. Like what? Like going to the sheriff, getting help from your neighbors, making enough noise that Vernon cannot operate in the shadows. She paused. Or like selling on your own terms and starting fresh somewhere else, somewhere he cannot find you. Somewhere we cannot find me, you mean? Xander turned her hand over in his, tracing the calluses on her palm. Because I need to know, Theresa. Before I make any decisions about the ranch, I need to know if you are staying or leaving. Because that changes everything. Her breath caught. How does it change things? If you are leaving, if you are taking the children and going to Denver in a week or a month, then this ranch is all I have, and I will fight for it no matter the cost. But if there is a chance you might stay, if there is a chance we might build something together here, then I need to think about more than just my grief and stubbornness. I need to think about keeping you safe, keeping those children safe. Theresa felt tears prick her eyes. Xander, I cannot ask you to give up your home for us. We barely know each other. I know enough. He cupped her face gently with his free hand. I know you are brave and resourceful and fiercely protective. I know you are kind even when life has given you every reason not to be. I know the sound of your laugh brightens my whole day, and I know I look forward to our evening talks more than anything else. I know I am falling in love with you, Theresa, and I think maybe you feel something for me too. She could not deny it. The truth sat heavy and warm in her chest, undeniable. I do. I feel so much, and it terrifies me. Thomas has been gone such a short time. What kind of woman does that make me? Human, Xander said simply. Grief does not follow a schedule, Theresa. You loved your husband, I can see that. And I loved my wife. But they are gone, and we are still here, still living. Is it so wrong to want happiness again? Is it so wrong to reach for it when it is offered? No, she whispered. But I am scared, Xander. I am so scared of trusting this, of believing in it, and then having it ripped away like everything else. Then let me be scared with you. Let us figure this out together. He leaned his forehead against hers. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or make any big decisions tonight. I am just asking you to consider staying, to give us a real chance. Theresa closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of him, the solid presence that had become so essential to her sense of safety and home. Okay, she breathed. Okay, I will stay, we will stay. Xander exhaled like he had been holding his breath for days. Then he did something that surprised her. He laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. Really? You mean it? I mean it. She pulled back to look at him, smiling despite her tears. Though you are still going to talk to the sheriff about Vernon tomorrow, because if we are building a life here, we need to make sure we have a life to build. Fair enough. He stood, pulling her up with him, and then hesitated, his intentions clear in his eyes. May I? She answered by rising on her toes and kissing him, soft and sweet and full of promise. His arms came around her, holding her close but not tight, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. She sank into the kiss, into the feeling of being cherished and desired and safe all at once. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers again. I will do everything in my power to make sure you never regret this decision. I know you will. She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. Now go to bed and actually sleep. I will keep watch for a few hours. Theresa, I know how to shoot a rifle, and I will wake you at the first sign of trouble. Go, rest. You are no good to anyone exhausted. Reluctantly, he agreed, though she suspected he did not sleep much despite his best efforts. Theresa sat in the kitchen, the rifle across her lap, and watched the darkness outside the window. She thought about the strange path that had led her here from widowhood and poverty to this ranch, this man, this new possibility of happiness. She thought about Thomas and whether he would approve. In her heart, she believed he would. Thomas had loved her fiercely and would have wanted her to be cared for, would have wanted their children to be safe and provided for. He had been a practical man who understood that life moved forward whether you were ready or not. And she thought about Elizabeth, the woman whose house this had been, whose dreams had shaped this place. Theresa hoped Elizabeth would approve too, would want Xander to find joy again rather than living as a ghost in the home they had built. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Theresa felt something settle in her chest. Peace, perhaps. Or simply the acceptance that she was exactly where she needed to be. True to his word, Xander rode into Pueblo that morning to speak with Sheriff Thompson. Theresa tried not to worry, keeping herself busy with the children and household tasks. When Xander returned late afternoon, he was not alone. 3 other men rode with him, ranchers from neighboring properties, all of whom had received visits from Cole Vernon. They gathered in the Falcon house, and Theresa provided coffee and food while they talked strategy. The consensus was clear. Vernon targeted isolated ranchers, people who stood alone. United, they presented a much harder target. They agreed to watch each other's properties, to send word immediately if Vernon or his men were spotted, to present a unified front against any threats. "He is a businessman, not a gunfighter," one of the ranchers said. "If he sees we are organized and the sheriff is paying attention, he will likely move on to easier targets elsewhere." It was not a perfect solution, but it was something. The men left with promises to return if needed, and Theresa felt the knot of fear in her stomach loosen slightly. Over the next week, Vernon did not return. Whether he had gotten word of the ranchers' alliance or simply decided to pursue easier prey elsewhere, the threat seemed to recede. Life on the ranch began to return to normal, though Xander still kept watch and the rifle stayed within easy reach. During this time, Theresa and Xander navigated the strange new territory of their relationship. They were not married, not even formally courting, but something deeper than friendship had taken root between them. They stole kisses in the kitchen when the children were occupied. They sat closer together on the porch in the evenings. They talked about the future with the tentative hope of people who had learned not to take anything for granted. The children, perceptive as children were, noticed the change. One evening, as Theresa tucked Mary into bed, her eldest daughter asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. "You love Mr. Xander, Mama?" Theresa considered lying, protecting her daughter from complications, but Mary deserved honesty. "I think I do, sweetheart." "Is that all right with you?" Mary was quiet for a moment, her expression serious. "I miss Papa. I do too, every day. But Mr. Xander is nice, he is kind to us, and you smile more now than you did before." Mary looked up at her mother. "Papa would want you to smile, would he not?" Theresa felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Yes, my love, he would want that very much." "Then I think it is all right if you love Mr. Xander, I mean." Mary paused. "Do you think we will stay here? Is this our home now? Would you like it to be?" "Yes." Mary's answer came without hesitation. "I like it here. I like having my own bed and enough food and not being scared all the time. I like that Samuel has stopped crying at night because his stomach hurts. I like seeing Rebecca and James play without worrying, and I like Mr. Xander. He talks to me like I am grown up, not a baby." Theresa hugged her daughter close. "Then this can be our home if we work to make it so. But Mary, you need to understand something important. Even if Mr. Xander and I decide to marry someday, he will never replace your father. You can love them both. That is allowed." "I know, Mama. I am not little anymore. I understand." And perhaps she did. Perhaps children understood more about the complexity of love and loss than adults gave them credit for. Theresa kissed her daughter good night and left the room with a lighter heart. As autumn arrived, painting the prairie in golds and reds, life continued to settle into comfortable patterns. The garden Theresa had planted yielded late vegetables. The cattle were driven to winter pastures. Firewood was stacked high against the coming cold. Theresa taught all 4 children their lessons each morning, pleased to see even young James learning his letters. Xander proved himself not just a capable rancher, but a natural father figure. He was patient with Samuel's endless questions, gentle with Rebecca's fears, playful with James's antics, and respectful of Mary's emerging independence. He never tried to replace Thomas, but carved out his own place in the children's hearts. And with Theresa, he was courting her properly now, making his intentions clear. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie. He complimented her cooking, her efficiency, her way with the children. He held her hand during their evening talks and kissed her goodnight with increasing passion that nonetheless always stopped before impropriety. "I want to marry you," he said one October evening as they sat on the porch watching the first stars appear. "I know it has not been long and I do not want to rush you, but I want you to know my intentions, Theresa. I want you and those children as my family, permanent and legal and bound together." Theresa's heart raced, but she had been thinking about this possibility for weeks now. "I want that too. But there are complications, such as, people will talk. They will say it is too soon after Thomas's death, that I am improper, that we are setting a bad example. Let them talk." Xander took her hands in his. "We know the truth. We know this is right. And the children need time to adjust to the idea, especially Mary. She is old enough to understand what this means. So we take time. We wait until you feel ready, until the children feel ready." He kissed her knuckles. "I am not going anywhere, Theresa. We have the rest of our lives." His patience and understanding made her love him more. "What about spring? A spring wedding would give us time to prepare, to make sure everyone is comfortable with this change. Spring sounds perfect." Xander pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. 2 weeks later, Cole Vernon returned. This time, he did not come to the ranch. Instead, word came through one of the neighboring ranchers that Vernon had filed a claim with the Territorial Land Office, asserting that the Falcon Ranch boundaries overlapped with a property he had recently purchased, and demanding Xander cede the disputed land or face legal action. Xander made the trip to the land office in Denver, taking several days to sort through records and documents. Theresa spent those days anxious and worried, keeping herself busy but always watching the road for his return. When he finally came back, his expression was grim. "Vernon purchased a property adjacent to mine using a survey from 1869 that shows different boundaries than the survey I used when I bought this land in 1872. He is claiming I encroached on his property and demanding I either pay him for the land or move my boundaries back, which would mean losing my best grazing pasture and access to the creek. Can he do that? Can he just claim your land? Legally, it is complicated. The surveys contradict each other, and it will likely require a territorial judge to sort out. That means lawyers, court fees, months of uncertainty." Xander sank into a chair, exhausted. "Even if I win, it will cost me dearly. And if I lose, we will face it together," Theresa said firmly, kneeling beside his chair. "Whatever happens, we will handle it together. You are not alone in this anymore, Xander." He looked at her with such love and gratitude that it made her chest ache. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "Fate, maybe. Or just good timing." She smiled. "Or maybe you are being rewarded for offering a table with room for a desperate woman and her 4 hungry children." That night, they gathered the children and explained the situation in simple terms. There might be legal trouble ahead. Things might be uncertain for a while, but they were a family now, and families faced troubles together. Samuel, bless him, stood up with all the seriousness his 8 years could muster. "I can work harder, Mr. Xander. I can do more chores to help." Mary nodded. "We all can. We can be really good and not cause problems." "You children are never problems," Xander said, his voice thick with emotion. You are the best thing that has happened to this ranch to me in a very long time. I just wanted you to know what was happening so you would not worry if you overheard grown-up conversations. Rebecca, practical even at 6, asked, "Will we have enough food?" "Yes, sweetheart. I promise you will always have enough food." It was the right answer. Rebecca nodded, satisfied, and the tension in the room eased. Over the following months, Xander dealt with lawyers and land disputes while Theresa kept the household running smoothly. Money was tighter, as legal fees ate into the ranch's profits, but they managed. Theresa proved herself adept at stretching resources, making meals from basic ingredients, mending clothes until they could not be mended anymore. Through it all, their relationship deepened. Adversity had a way of revealing character, and what Theresa saw in Xander was strength, integrity, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. He never took out his frustrations on her or the children, never made her feel like a burden despite the extra mouths to feed during a difficult time. And Xander saw Theresa's resilience, her creativity in the face of hardship, her ability to keep spirits high even when circumstances were grim. She was his partner in every sense of the word, not just keeping house but offering counsel, emotional support, and perspective when he felt overwhelmed. Winter arrived, blanketing the ranch in snow. The legal battle dragged on, but life continued. Christmas was simple that year with handmade gifts and a modest meal, but it was joyful. Theresa felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in years, as she watched her children play with the toys Xander had carved for them, as she shared meaningful glances with the man she loved across the dinner table. On Christmas evening, after the children were in bed, Xander gave Theresa a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring, nothing fancy but beautiful in its understated elegance. "I know we said spring," Xander began, "but I want you to have this now. Not as a wedding ring yet, but as a promise. A promise that no matter what happens with Vernon and the land dispute, no matter what challenges we face, we are in this together. You and me and those 4 wonderful children upstairs." Theresa slipped the ring on her finger, finding it fit perfectly. "How did you afford this with the legal fees?" "I have been saving a little bit each month since you agreed to stay. Some things are worth sacrificing for." She kissed him then, deep and passionate, conveying everything words could not express. When they finally parted, both flushed and breathing hard, Xander groaned. "Spring cannot come fast enough." Theresa laughed, the sound full of joy and promise. "Patience, my love. Good things come to those who wait." "I am not a patient man, Theresa Dalton." "Then I suppose you will learn to be Xander Falcon." As winter progressed into early 1879, the legal situation finally resolved. The territorial judge reviewed both surveys, heard testimony, and ruled in Xander's favor, determining that the 1872 survey was more accurate and properly conducted. Vernon was ordered to acknowledge the correct boundaries and pay court costs. It was a victory, but a costly one. The legal fees had depleted Xander's savings significantly. He would need a good year to recover financially, but the ranch was secure, and that was what mattered. With the threat of Vernon finally behind them, attention turned to wedding plans. Theresa wanted something simple, a ceremony at the ranch with just a few friends and neighbors. She had been married in a church the first time, with all the traditional trappings. This marriage felt different, more grounded and real, and she wanted the ceremony to reflect that. They set the date for early May, when the prairie would be in bloom and the weather mild. Theresa sewed herself a new dress, simple blue calico but nice enough for a wedding. Mary and Rebecca would stand up with her, while Samuel and James would stand with Xander. The circuit preacher agreed to perform the ceremony during his spring rounds. As the wedding approached, Theresa experienced moments of unexpected nervousness. She was ready for this marriage, wanted it deeply, but the finality of it sometimes caught her off guard. She would be Theresa Falcon. Her children would bear a different surname than their birth father. Their lives would be permanently entwined with Xander's. One evening, about a week before the wedding, she confessed these feelings to Xander as they sat together on the porch. "I am not having second thoughts," she clarified quickly, seeing his concerned expression. "I love you and I want to marry you, but it feels so significant, you know. Like closing one chapter completely and starting another." "That is exactly what it is," Xander said gently. "And it is all right to feel nervous about that. You are not betraying Thomas's memory by moving forward, Theresa. You are honoring the life he wanted for you and your children, a life of safety and happiness and love. How do you always know the right thing to say?" "Because I feel the same uncertainties about Elizabeth. Sometimes I worry that I am dishonoring her memory by being this happy with you. But then I remember something she said to me before she died." Xander paused, his expression distant with memory. "She knew she was not going to make it. The fever was too strong. And she made me promise that I would not spend my life alone, that I would find someone to love again. She said she wanted me to be happy, even if it was not with her." Tears streamed down Theresa's face. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was, and so are you, different but equally remarkable in your own way." He wiped her tears gently. "We have both loved and lost, Theresa. But we have also found each other, and that is its own kind of miracle. Let us honor our past by building a beautiful future." The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather. The ranch house was decorated with wildflowers, and neighbors arrived with food and well wishes. Theresa wore her blue dress with the gold ring. Xander had given her at Christmas on a chain around her neck. That ring would move to her left hand during the ceremony, joined by a matching band. The children were freshly scrubbed and dressed in their best clothes. Mary had even attempted to tame her wild hair into braids. They were nervous and excited, understanding that this day changed everything. The circuit preacher, Reverend Matthews, was a kind older man who had agreed to keep the ceremony short and personal. As Theresa stood beside Xander, holding his hands and looking into his eyes, she felt the rightness of this moment settle over her like a blessing. "Do you, Xander Falcon, take Theresa Dalton to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, until death do you part?" "I do." Xander's voice was strong and certain. "And do you, Theresa Dalton, take Xander Falcon to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health, until death do you part?" "I do." Theresa's voice matched his uncertainty. "Then by the power vested in me by the Colorado Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Xander, you may kiss your bride." Xander pulled Theresa close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of their small gathering. When they finally parted, both were grinning like fools. The celebration that followed was joyful if modest. There was food and music. One of the neighbors played fiddle and dancing. Theresa danced with Xander, with Samuel, even with little James, who giggled the entire time. She felt lighter than air, happier than she had any right to be after everything she had been through. As evening drew on and guests began to depart, Theresa found herself standing with Mary, watching Xander dance with Rebecca while Samuel taught James some kind of complicated game involving pebbles. "Are you happy, Mama?" Mary asked. "So happy, sweetheart. Are you?" Mary considered the question seriously, as she did everything. "Yes, Mr. Xander, I mean Papa Xander." She tested the name, seeing how it felt. "Papa Xander is good to us. This feels like home now. I think Papa Thomas would approve." "I think so too." Theresa hugged her daughter close. "Thank you for being so understanding about all of this. I know it has not been easy. You are happy, and we are safe and fed and together. That is all that matters, Mama." Out of the mouths of children, Theresa thought, came the clearest wisdom. That night, after the guests had left and the children were finally asleep, Xander and Theresa found themselves alone as husband and wife for the first time. There was nervousness, certainly, as they navigated the intimate reality of marriage. But there was also tenderness, passion, and profound connection. They came together as two people who had survived loss and hardship and found each other on the other side, two people choosing to build something new and beautiful from the wreckage of their past. Afterwards, lying in Xander's arms in the bedroom that was now truly theirs, Theresa felt complete in a way she had not thought possible. This was not a replacement for what she had lost with Thomas. This was something entirely its own, and it was good. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Xander replied, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. Thank you for seeing us when we needed to be seen, for making room at your table when we had nowhere else to go. My table will always have room for you and those children, now and forever." Life as Mrs. Falcon proved to be everything Theresa had hoped for and more. The days fell into comfortable rhythms: cooking, cleaning, teaching the children, helping Xander with ranch tasks. But it was the small moments that defined her happiness. Xander kissing her before heading out to check on the cattle, Samuel proudly showing his stepfather a new skill he had learned, Rebecca calling Xander Papa for the first time, James falling asleep in Xander's lap during evening stories, Mary confiding her hopes and dreams with the certainty of a girl who knew she was loved and protected. Summer arrived, hot and bright, and with it came hard work. Hay had to be cut and stored, fences mended, cattle branded. But there were also moments of pure joy: swimming in the creek on especially hot days, picnics under the cottonwood trees, lazy evenings watching thunderstorms roll across the prairie. By autumn, Theresa realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with complicated emotions. Joy, certainly, at the prospect of giving Xander a child, but also fear, remembering what he had told her about losing Elizabeth and their baby. And guilt, wondering if the children would feel replaced by this new baby. She told Xander one evening after the children were in bed, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he went very still, his expression unreadable. Then tears filled his eyes and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "Theresa, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "I know after what happened with Elizabeth I am terrified," he admitted. "But also happy beyond words. We will get you the best care, make sure you have everything you need. I cannot lose you, Theresa, I cannot." "You will not lose me. I am healthy and strong, and we will face this together, just like everything else." They told the children a few weeks later, once the pregnancy was more certain. The reactions varied. Samuel was excited at the prospect of a baby brother. Rebecca wanted a sister to play with. James was confused about where babies came from, and Mary was quiet and thoughtful. Later, Theresa found Mary alone in the bedroom she shared with Rebecca, staring out the window. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" Mary turned, her expression vulnerable in a way that reminded Theresa her eldest was still just a child. "Will you still love us when the new baby comes? Will Papa Xander?" "Oh, Mary." Theresa gathered her daughter close. "Listen to me carefully. This baby will not replace any of you. You four are already Xander's children in every way that matters. He loves you because of who you are, not because of biology. And I love you more than life itself. A new baby just means more love, not less. Do you understand? I think so. Mary was quiet for a moment. I am glad you are happy, Mama. You deserve to be happy. So do you, my darling girl. So do all of you. As winter approached and Theresa's belly grew, the family prepared for the new addition. Xander built a cradle, the same design he had made years ago for the child he lost. Theresa sewed tiny clothes. Mary and Rebecca helped prepare the nursery, and even Samuel and James got involved, gathering soft moss to line the cradle mattress. The baby arrived in early March of 1880, born during a late winter snowstorm. Dr. Harrison from Pueblo made it to the ranch just in time, and Xander wore a path in the kitchen floor pacing while Mary kept him company. When the baby's cry finally rang out, strong and healthy, Xander rushed upstairs to find Theresa exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. A daughter, the doctor announced. Healthy lungs, good size. Mother and baby are both doing fine. Xander sank onto the bed beside Theresa, staring at the baby in wonder. She is perfect. She is ours. Theresa carefully placed the baby in Xander's arms, watching his face transform with love and awe. What should we name her? They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his daughter's tiny perfect face, Xander said, Grace. I want to name her Grace because she is exactly that Grace in our lives. Grace Elizabeth Falcon, Theresa added, honoring Xander's first wife. So she knows where she comes from and how much love surrounds her. Xander looked at Theresa with such profound gratitude and love that words were unnecessary. They sat together, admiring their daughter, until the other children could not wait any longer and tumbled into the room, eager to meet their new sister. The children gathered around the bed, peering at the baby with varying degrees of curiosity and wonder. James, now 5, seemed unsure what to make of the squirming bundle, but Rebecca immediately fell in love, begging to hold her. Samuel was proud to be the big brother to so many siblings, and Mary looked at the baby with tears in her eyes. She looks like you, Mama, Mary whispered. She looks like all of us, Xander corrected gently. She is part of this family, same as each of you. This is your sister, and you will help us raise her with love and kindness. In the days and weeks that followed, Grace became the center of the household. The children were endlessly fascinated by her, competing for turns to hold her or fetch things for Theresa. Xander proved himself a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking Grace around the house when she fussed at night, gazing at her with such tenderness that it made Theresa's heart swell. Spring arrived, and with it came the return to ranch rhythms. But everything felt different now, fuller somehow. The Falcon Ranch was not just a property or a business, it was truly a home, filled with laughter and love and the beautiful chaos of 5 children. One evening in late April, Theresa and Xander sat on the porch as they often did, watching the sunset. Grace slept in Theresa's arms while the other children played in the yard, their shouts and laughter carrying on the warm breeze. You ever think about that day? Xander asked. The day we met in Pueblo, all the time. Theresa leaned against his shoulder. I think about how desperate I was, how frightened. I had 4 hungry children and 2 days of food and no idea how we would survive. And I had an empty house and an empty heart, Xander continued. And then suddenly there you were, this fierce, proud woman who needed help but was terrified to accept it. You said your table had room for every one of us. It did. It does. He kissed her temple. Thank you for taking that chance, for trusting me when you had no reason to. Thank you for seeing us, for offering help without expecting anything in return. She paused. Though I suppose you got more than you bargained for. One desperate widow turned into a wife and 5 children. Xander laughed. Best bargain I ever made. I would do it again in a heartbeat. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Theresa thought about the journey that had brought them here, loss and hardship and fear, yes, but also hope and kindness and love. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, broken down on the side of a Colorado road with a wagon wheel cracked and her spirit close behind. She thought about the man Xander had been, haunted by grief and living half a life. And she thought about who they were now, healed, whole, and building something beautiful together. Life was not perfect. There would be challenges ahead, hard seasons and difficult years. But they would face them together. This family they had created from desperation and compassion and the simple act of making room at a table. "Mama," Rebecca called, "come see what Samuel found." Theresa handed Grace to Xander and went to investigate, finding her children clustered around a tiny nest that had fallen from a tree. 3 baby birds chirped inside, and the children were debating how to help them. As Theresa knelt beside her children, helping them understand how to care for the birds until they could return the nest safely, she felt Xander's eyes on her. She looked back at him and saw her own contentment reflected in his face. This was happiness, she realized. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of love. Not perfection, but partnership. Not the life she had planned, but the life she had built from circumstances and choices and grace. The summer of 1880 brought prosperity to the ranch. The cattle herd had grown, hay prices were good, and Xander was able to hire additional help for the busy season. This meant more time for family, more moments of joy and connection. By the time Grace turned 1 in March of 1881, she was walking and beginning to talk, much to the delight of her siblings. The older children were thriving too. Mary, now 13, was becoming a real help to Theresa, taking on more responsibilities around the house. Samuel, at 10, worked alongside Xander regularly, learning the ranching business. Rebecca and James attended school in Pueblo during the academic year, making friends and bringing home their lessons to share. Theresa sometimes marveled at how far they had come. The children who had once been gaunt with hunger were now healthy and strong. The woman who had felt broken beyond repair now woke each morning with purpose and joy. And Xander, who had been living in the shadow of his grief, was fully alive again, his eyes bright with happiness. One day in late spring, as Theresa worked in her vegetable garden with Grace playing nearby, a wagon approached the ranch. She recognized the driver as James Monroe, who ran the general store in Pueblo. "Afternoon, Mrs. Falcon," Monroe called as he pulled to a stop. "Got a telegram for your husband. Came into town this morning." Theresa wiped her hands on her apron and took the telegram, her heart fluttering with nervousness. Telegrams usually meant important news, and important news was not always good. She thanked Monroe, scooped up Grace, and went to find Xander. He was in the barn repairing tack and looked up with a smile when she entered, a smile that faded when he saw her expression. "What is wrong?" "Telegram." She handed it to him, bouncing Grace on her hip to keep the baby entertained while Xander read. His eyebrows rose. "Well, this is unexpected." "What is it?" "My uncle passed away. My father's brother lived in Kansas. I barely knew him." Xander continued reading. "Apparently he left me his property, 40 acres of farmland outside Topeka." Theresa processed this information. "Are you going to go claim it?" "I suppose I should at least see what we are dealing with. Maybe it is worth selling, could bring in some money to expand the ranch here." He looked at her. "Would you want to come with me? Make a trip of it. The children could see a different part of the country, and we could visit your sister in Denver on the way back." The idea held appeal. Theresa had been meaning to write to Catherine to tell her sister about her new life, but somehow the months had slipped away. Showing up in person seemed better anyway. When would we leave? Soon, I think. Before the real heat of summer sets in, we could be gone a month, maybe 6 weeks total. They discussed logistics that evening after the children were in bed. Xander would ask his hired hand, Tom, to watch the ranch while they were gone. They would take the larger wagon, loaded with supplies for camping along the way since hotel rooms for 7 people would be prohibitively expensive. The children were thrilled at the prospect of an adventure. Even Mary, who had become something of a homebody, expressed excitement about seeing new places. They spent a week preparing mending clothes, organizing supplies, planning routes. They departed on a bright May morning, the wagon packed with everything they would need. The journey to Topeka would take about 2 weeks, traveling slowly to accommodate the children and making camp each night. It was hard work, but it was also joyful. They sang songs as they traveled, told stories around the campfire, and marveled at the changing landscape as they moved northeast across Colorado and into Kansas. Theresa was reminded of the journey she had made with Thomas and the children years ago, but this trip felt entirely different. There was no desperation now, no fear. Just a family exploring together, secure in their love for one another. They reached Topeka in mid-May and found Xander's uncle's property on the outskirts of town. The farmhouse was small but well-maintained, and the land was indeed 40 acres of good soil. Xander spent several days meeting with lawyers and local officials, sorting through paperwork and determining the property's value. "We could sell it," Xander said one evening as they discussed their options. "Use the money to buy more cattle, maybe expand the house to give the children more room." "Or we could keep it," Theresa suggested. "Save it for one of the children when they are grown, give them a start in life." Xander considered this, then nodded. "That is a good idea. We will hold on to it, rent out the land to local farmers for income, and keep the property for the future." With that decision made, they prepared to begin the journey back west, with a stop in Denver to find Catherine. Theresa was nervous about seeing her sister after so many years. Would Catherine even still be in Denver? Would she judge Theresa for remarrying so quickly? Would she approve of the choices Theresa had made? Denver was larger than Theresa remembered, bustling with activity. Finding Catherine proved easier than expected. She was listed in the city directory as running a boarding house near the center of town. They made their way there, the children's eyes wide at the tall buildings and crowded streets. The boarding house was a tidy 3-story structure on a quiet street. Theresa approached the door with her heart pounding, Xander beside her with Grace in his arms, the other children clustered behind them. She knocked, and a moment later the door opened to reveal a woman in her 30s with Theresa's same brown hair and blue eyes. Catherine stared at Theresa for a long moment, then burst into tears. "Theresa! Oh my God, Theresa!" She pulled her sister into a fierce hug. "I thought you were dead. When I did not hear from you after Thomas passed, I thought the worst. I sent letters, but they all came back." "We moved," Theresa explained, tears streaming down her own face. "We had to leave the homestead, and everything was chaos, and I am so sorry I did not write. I should have found a way." Catherine pulled back, noticing for the first time the tall man and the children. "And who are all these people?" "This is my husband, Xander Falcon, and these are my children Mary, Samuel, Rebecca, James, and Grace." "Your husband?" Catherine's eyes widened. "But Thomas died of fever more than 2 years ago now." Theresa took a deep breath. "It is a long story, Catherine. Can we come in?" "I want to tell you everything." They spent the afternoon and evening at Catherine's boarding house. Theresa recounting everything that had happened since she and Thomas had left St. Louis all those years ago. The struggles on the homestead, Thomas's death, the desperate journey north with dwindling supplies and a broken wagon, meeting Xander in Pueblo, and everything that had followed. Catherine listened to it all, occasionally asking questions, her expression moving through shock, sadness, and finally, joy. When Theresa finished, Catherine reached across the table and gripped her sister's hands. "I am so glad you found each other," she said, looking between Theresa and Xander. "And I am sorry I was not there when you needed me. If I had known you were in trouble, there was no way for you to know, and everything worked out as it was meant to." Theresa squeezed her sister's hands. "I am just grateful we have found each other again now." They stayed in Denver for 3 days, reconnecting and building bridges that had fallen into disrepair. Catherine's boarding house was successful, and she had made a good life for herself in the city. She had never married, dedicating herself instead to her business and her independence. On the last evening before the Falcons departed to return to Pueblo, Catherine pulled Theresa aside for a private conversation. "You seem truly happy," Catherine observed. "When you talked about Thomas, there was love there but also weariness. When you talk about Xander, you light up." "I love Thomas," Theresa said firmly. "But you are right that it was hard. We were always struggling, always just barely getting by. With Xander, life has challenges, but it is not a constant battle for survival. And he is such a good father to all the children, not just Grace. They adore him." "He looks at you like you hung the moon," Theresa smiled. "And I look at him the same way. Is that terrible? Should I feel guilty about being this happy? Absolutely not. Life is too short and too hard to feel guilty about happiness." Catherine hugged her sister. "You deserve this, Theresa. All of it. The love, the security, the joy. I am just glad I got to see it with my own eyes." They said their goodbyes the next morning with promises to stay in better contact. Theresa had a proper address now, and Catherine swore she would visit the ranch before the year was out. The journey back to Pueblo was uneventful but pleasant. They traveled at an easy pace, the children's son browned and happy, Xander and Theresa content with the success of their trip. They arrived home in mid-June to find the ranch in good order, Tom having managed everything capably in their absence. Falling back into their routines felt wonderful. Theresa had not realized how much she had missed the ranch until she saw it again: the wide prairie, the sturdy house, the barn and corrals, all of it familiar and beloved. This was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. As summer progressed, life continued in its pleasant patterns. The garden flourished, providing vegetables for the family and extras to preserve for winter. The cattle fattened on summer grass. The children grew and learned and played. And Theresa and Xander's love continued to deepen, their partnership strengthening with each passing day. One evening in August, Theresa realized she was pregnant again. The discovery brought a smile to her face: another baby, another blessing to add to their growing family. She told Xander that night, and his reaction was joy mixed with immediate concern for her health. "I am fine," she assured him. "Strong and healthy. This baby will be fine too. I know. I trust you. I trust us." He kissed her gently. "Our family keeps growing. Is that all right? I know we already have 5 children." "Are you joking? I love having a full house. The more the merrier as far as I am concerned." This pregnancy felt easier than the one with Grace, perhaps because Theresa was not dealing with the complications of a new marriage and blended family. She told the children early, and they reacted with varying degrees of excitement. Grace, now 18 months old, was too young to understand, but the others were delighted at the prospect of another sibling. The baby arrived in early April of 1882, Another daughter they named Hope Catherine Falcon, hope for the future. Catherine for Theresa's sister, who had proven that family bonds could survive time and distance. The birth was smooth, and baby Hope was healthy and strong. 2 daughters and 4 older children, their family felt complete. Theresa sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life. From desperate widow with 4 starving children to prosperous rancher's wife with a growing family, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. But it was not magic, she knew. It was the result of hard work, mutual respect, and the simple act of 2 broken people choosing to trust each other and build something new. It was Xander seeing a family in need and making room at his table. It was Theresa finding the courage to accept help. It was both of them choosing love after loss. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, allowing Xander to expand the cattle operation and build additional structures, a larger barn, a bunkhouse for seasonal workers, even a small schoolhouse where Theresa could teach not just her own children, but also the children of neighboring ranchers. Mary grew into a lovely young woman, helping Theresa with the younger children, and eventually, when she turned 18, beginning to receive interest from local young men. Samuel proved to have a natural affinity for ranching and began taking on more responsibility. Rebecca developed a love of reading and writing, filling journals with stories and observations. James was the adventurous one, always exploring and getting into harmless mischief. Grace and Hope were constant companions, despite their age difference, getting into their own adventures. By 1885, Mary was 20 and courting a young rancher named David Miller from a neighboring property. Theresa watched her eldest daughter fall in love and felt the bittersweet ache of a mother watching her child grow up. The wedding was planned for early summer, and the whole family threw themselves into preparations. On the day of Mary's wedding, Theresa stood with her daughter, helping her into her wedding dress, a beautiful creation of white lace and satin that Theresa had sewn herself over many months. "Are you nervous?" Theresa asked as she fastened the buttons. "A little, but also excited. I love David, Mama, and I am ready to start my own family. You will make a wonderful wife and mother. I am so proud of the woman you have become." Mary turned to face her mother, tears glittering in her eyes. "I want to thank you, Mama, for being so strong when Papa Thomas died, for getting us to Pueblo, for having the courage to accept Mr. Xander's help. If you had not done those things, we would not be here. I would not be here, about to marry the man I love." Theresa hugged her daughter carefully, mindful of the delicate dress. "You do not need to thank me for that, sweetheart. I did what any mother would do. But you did more than survive. You built a life for us, a good life. And you taught us that it is okay to accept help, that it is okay to love again after loss. That family is what we make it, not just what we are born into." Mary pulled back, smiling through her tears. "Those are lessons I will carry with me into my own marriage." The wedding was beautiful, held at the ranch with friends and family gathered to celebrate. Theresa watched Mary and David exchange vows, saw the love and hope shining in their faces, and felt profound gratitude for the path that had led them all here. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the newly married couple had departed for their own home, Theresa and Xander sat on their porch in the familiar pattern of their evenings. Grace and Hope were asleep inside, as were Samuel, Rebecca, and James, all exhausted from the day's festivities. "Our first child married and gone," Xander mused. "Though I suppose Mary was not really mine to begin with." "She absolutely was yours," Theresa corrected firmly. "Biology does not make a father, Xander. Love and commitment do. You have been her father in every way that matters since that day in Pueblo 7 years ago. 7 years. Xander shook his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Both, I think. Theresa leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders automatically. It is strange to think that if our wagon wheel had not broken that day, if you had not been in town at that exact moment, if you had not offered help, none of this would exist. I prefer to think it was fate. We were meant to find each other, you and I and those children. Everything that happened, all the heartbreak and struggle that led us to that point, was leading us to each other. Do you really believe that? I do. I have to believe it, because the alternative is too painful, the idea that we might have missed each other, that you might have passed through Pueblo, and I never would have known you existed. He kissed the top of her head. I cannot imagine my life without you and this family, Theresa. You brought my house back to life. You brought me back to life. And you gave us a home when we needed one most. You showed my children what a good man looks like, how a real father loves and protects and guides. She tilted her face up to look at him. I love you, Xander Falcon. More today than yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than today. That is quite a promise. It is not a promise. It is a fact. He kissed her then, deep and sweet and full of the love they had built over 7 years of partnership and devotion. When they finally parted, both were smiling. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Samuel took over more of the ranch operations as Xander began to slow down, not from any illness but simply from the natural aging process. Rebecca married a lawyer from Denver and moved to the city, though she visited frequently. James, true to his adventurous spirit, spent several years working on various ranches throughout Colorado and Wyoming before eventually settling down and marrying a girl from Pueblo. Grace and Hope grew into lovely young women, both of them inheriting the best qualities of their parents. Grace had her father's practical nature and her mother's compassion, while Hope had her mother's strength and her father's humor. By 1895, Theresa was 41 and Xander 44. They were grandparents several times over, their house often filled with visiting children and grandchildren. The ranch remained prosperous, now run primarily by Samuel with help from James when he was in the area. One evening in late summer, as Theresa and Xander sat on their porch watching yet another Colorado sunset, Theresa reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them here. You remember what you said to me that first day? She asked. In Pueblo, when Samuel told you about our situation. I said a lot of things that day. You said your table had room for every one of us, all 4 children and me. You said it without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Xander smiled. It was the most natural thing in the world. You needed help and I had help to give. Everything else followed from that simple truth. Everything else, Theresa repeated softly. Marriage, more children, a lifetime of partnership and love, all from that one moment of kindness. I got the better end of that deal, I assure you. I do not know about that. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I think we both got exactly what we needed when we needed it most. We saved each other, Xander. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. Then I propose we keep saving each other every day, for as long as we both shall live. That sounds perfect. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun completed its journey below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. From inside the house came the sounds of their family, Grace playing piano, Hope singing along, Samuel discussing cattle prices with his father, grandchildren running and laughing. The sounds of life, of love, of home. Theresa closed her eyes, breathing in the cool evening air, and sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the broken wagon wheel that had changed everything. For the cowboy who had offered help without expecting anything in return, for the courage to accept that help, and for every day since that had led her to this moment of perfect contentment. She opened her eyes and looked at Xander, finding him watching her with that same expression of love and wonder he had worn since the day they met. Some things, she thought, never changed, and some things only grew stronger with time. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," he replied. Now and always. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a family and a life from desperation and compassion, who had proven that love could bloom even in the harshest circumstances, and who would continue to face whatever came next together, united in purpose and devotion. Their story, which had begun with 4 hungry children and 2 days of food and a cowboy who said his table had room for them all, had grown into something neither could have imagined: a legacy of love, a testament to the power of kindness, and a family that would continue for generations, all because 2 broken people had chosen to trust each other and believe in the possibility of happiness after heartbreak. The years turned into decades, and Theresa and Xander grew old together, their love never diminishing but rather deepening with each passing season. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, welcomed new grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, and watched with pride as their children built successful lives of their own. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through Samuel to his children, a testament to everything Xander and Theresa had built together. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the core remained the same: the kitchen where Theresa had cooked that first breakfast, the porch where they had spent countless evenings talking, the bedroom they had shared for so many years. In their later years, as Xander's health began to fail, Theresa remained by his side, caring for him with the same devotion he had shown her family all those years ago. Their children and grandchildren visited frequently, filling the house with life and laughter, reminding them both that their love had created something that would outlast them both. On a quiet spring morning in 1910, Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep, Theresa holding his hand. He was 60 years old, and he had lived a full and beautiful life. The funeral was attended by family, friends, neighbors, and business associates from across Colorado, all of them touched in some way by Xander's kindness and integrity. Theresa mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had had 32 years together, and she treasured every moment. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by family, staying active and engaged until her own passing 5 years later in 1915, at the age of 61. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and the dates of their lives. But their real monument was not stone and carved words. It was the family they had created, the lives they had touched, and the love they had shared. And if you visited the Falcon Ranch even decades later, you might meet descendants who could tell you the story of how it all began with a desperate widow, 4 hungry children, 2 days of food, and a cowboy who said his table had room for every one of them. A simple act of kindness that had rippled through generations, proving that love and compassion can change the world one family at a time.